Hello, friends. Warm greetings of the day to all of you. So, I hope you all are basically rocking in your respective lives. Yes, I am saying this because you are definitely going to rock today after listening to the fantastic news that is the fantastic golden news highlight of today. Yes, please tighten your seat belts because today's news will basically shake you in a positive manner. So here it goes. The services activity hits 3-month high in November. Secondly, India's gross domestic product is basically expected to grow at 6.9% in the financial year 2023. Yes, dear guys, you have heard me right. The figure is not 6.5% but 6.9%. The World Bank has basically revised its projection for the growth rate of India for the financial year 2023. It has further quoted that India will remain one of the fastest growing major economies across the globe, and India is actually the mixed economy and also the developing economy, but its progress is being appreciated at a global level, and that's why its growth rate has been projected from 6.5% to 6.9% for the coming year by the renowned international organization. The third news aspect we are basically going to discuss is that India may export the handsets worth $9 billion in the financial year 2023. Isn't it a great news? We are excelling in the services sector. We are excelling in the manufacturing sector. Our gross domestic product is actually expected to further enhance in the coming year. Along with that, our Commerce Minister Shri Manish Goyalji announces the entire Millets story of India to the entire world. Isn't it really fantastic? So let's begin. India's gross domestic product is expected to grow at 6.9% in the financial year 2023 and will remain one of the fastest growing major economies, says the World Bank. The World Bank, in its India Development Update, has basically upgraded the forecast for the Indian economy to 6.9% from 6.5% earlier in the current fiscal year. A World Bank report said on Tuesday, India is basically expected to be one of the fastest growing major economies across the globe. The slowdown in the emerging economies could also position India as an attractive alternate investment decision. Dear friends, on this note, I would like to quote, many countries are basically thinking to remove their manufacturing operations from China. So, India would be the next attractive destination to be considered after China. The report sees the average retail inflation at 7.1% this year. The World Bank's India Development Update said India is affected by the spillovers from the United States, Euro area, and China. It, however, saw the government meeting the fiscal deficit target of 6.4% of the GDP in 2022-23. The World Bank expects India's GDP growth to slow down to 6.9% in the ongoing fiscal as compared to the 8.7% in the financial year 2021-22. But this is not actually disheartening because we are growing in comparison that is relative to the current performance. If we take the financial year 2021-22 as the basis, that won't be correct because the global turmoil was not existing to the great level at that time. As of now, we are undergoing a lot of restlessness in the global economy because of the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, supply chain disruptions, and the on and off occurring in the COVID crisis. The report cited tightening monetary policy and high commodity prices as the factors impacting the country's growth. Very true. The consumer price index based retail inflation, which the RBI mainly factors in while arriving at its monetary policy, is showing the signs of moderation but still remains above the central bank's upper tolerance level of 6% since January this year. The inflation dropped to 6.77% in October from 7.41% in the preceding month, mainly due to the easing prices in the food basket, though it remained above the Reserve Bank's comfort level for the 10th month in a row. All thanks basically go to the continuous monetary policy revisions by the Reserve Bank of India, because of which the inflation situation has got eased to the greater levels. But still, in order to attain more stability in inflation, that would happen gradually. But still, we should be actually happy that we are progressing at a very satisfactory rate that is beyond the expectations. The gross domestic product growth in the second quarter of the fiscal slowed to 6.3% as against a growth of 13.5% in the preceding 3 months. India, like its global peers, has been plagued by a rise in the commodity prices and tightening monetary policy by the central banks worldwide. Yes, of course, because the central banks worldwide have been revising their monetary policies time to time, that is, through the Monetary Policy Committee, by continuously raising the basis points, and that's the need of the hour. But still, India is performing quite well in actually comparison to its peer countries. That's what the World Bank is quoting. That is, World Bank is confident that the global slowdown has a much lower impact on India compared to other emerging economies. We have no concerns about India's debt sustainability at this stage, World Bank economist Mr. Dhruv Sharma said, adding that the public debt had declined. The RBI's 3-day Monetary Policy Committee, that is MPC meeting, commenced on Monday. The Reserve Bank of India will be presenting the monetary policy against the backdrop of the GDP growth slowing down as well as inflation being high above 6%. We do believe that the MPC will continue with the rate hikes this time, though the magnitude will be lower, probably 25 to 35 basis points, said Madan Sabnavis, chief economist at the Bank of Baroda. That is, what is necessary actually needs to be implemented. But the intensity of the rate hike would be less this time. Mr. Shaktikant Das has ruled out a recession for India, while the key government officials, including the finance minister, have said India remains a bright spot amid the global headwinds, because these times are quite sensitive. So we need to be prepared for all the uncertainties, because see, the Ukraine-Russia war which is going on, it's quite uncertain that to what extent it may go in future, because these types of events are quite catastrophic. That is, they are quite unforeseeable events. So we cannot take the guarantee, so we need to be quite proactive and we need to be quite prepared for the worst situations. though as per the present parameters, our country's overall economic situation is quite stable, right? But for the coming times, we don't know where the situation may head because of the unforeseeable events, and no one can comment on that, actually. However, from the foreign brokerages to the rating agencies, most of them have in recent days slashed India's economic growth forecasts. The expected slowdowns in Europe and North America, along with China's sluggish economy, are likely to hurt growth, while Russia's attack on Ukraine lingers. Geopolitical uncertainty, synchronized monetary tightening, and high energy prices are clearly weighing on the global growth in the first quarter of 2023, SBI said. I repeat once again, geopolitical uncertainty, synchronized monetary tightening, and high energy prices. These are the three critical factors which are clearly weighing on the global growth in the first quarter of 2023, SBI said. India's GDP growth for the July to September quarter slowed to 6.3% from 8.4% a year earlier and 13.5% in the previous quarter, owing to the slower growth of manufacturing and mining sectors. Nomura economists Sonal Verma and Aurodeep Nandi said in a report that they believe India's growth rate cycle has peaked and a broad-based economic situation is quite predictable in terms of slowdown which is underway. So, dear friends, according to this particular news article, we can summarize that India's situation in comparison to its global peers is quite satisfactory, and as quoted by the World Bank, that is a renowned international organization, India's performance is actually beyond the mark, because of which it has increased the growth estimate from 6.5% to 6.9% for the upcoming financial year. Now going forward, we will discuss the prospects for India's service sector. The services activity hits 3-month high in November, because of which it can be very well and confidently quoted that in the coming future, India's service industry is going to create miracles. India's services activity touched a 3-month high in November as the business inflows rose markedly amid accommodative demand conditions and led to further job creation, with service providers being optimistic for the year ahead, a private survey showed on Monday. The seasonally adjusted S&P Global India Services PMI Business Activity Index rose to 56.4 in November from 55.1 in October, indicating a sharp increase in output that was the quickest in the 3 months, even amid higher operating expenses. Truly commendable. The index has remained above the 50 mark that separates growth from contraction for the 16th consecutive month. India's service providers continued to reap the benefits of strong domestic demand, with PMI data for the penultimate month of 2022 showing faster increases in new businesses and output, said Pollyanna D. Lemma, Economics Associate Director at S&P Global. Moreover, expectations of demand buoyancy in the medium term promoted further job creation, she said. As per the survey report, there was another substantial increase in input costs, the second fastest since July, which underpinned the strongest upturn in selling charges in just under 5.5 years. Services company across India again reported higher operating expenses midway through the third fiscal quarter. In addition to the greater transportation costs, firms mentioned higher prices for energy, food, packaging, paper, plastic, and electrical products. Little changed from October. The overall rate of inflation was marked above its long-run average, S&P said. The festive season demand continues to boost activity in both manufacturing and services. However, intensifying growth headwinds are set to drive a modest slowdown in activity in the coming months, in our view, said Rahul Bajoria, Managing Director and Head of EM Asia, that is ex-China Economics at Barclays. Now let's discuss the inflation concern. Prices charged for the provision of services in India continued to increase in November as the companies transferred part of their additional cost burdens onto the consumers. The latest rise was the 21st in consecutive months and the strongest since July 2017. Whilst on the whole, the latest results are encouraging, the trend for inflation is somewhat concerning. Dilemma basically adding that the evidence of stubborn inflation may prompt further hikes to the policy rate at a time when global economic challenges could negatively impact India's growth. Meanwhile, employment rose at a solid pace that was among the quickest in over 3 years. Another factor that triggered job creation was an uptick in business confidence. Service providers were at their most upbeat towards the year-end outlook for output in just under 8 years, according to the survey report. Firms largely expect demand strength to be maintained in 2023, with some planning to lift marketing budgets to aid sales, S&P added. A sister survey last week showed India's factory activity expanding at its fastest pace in 3 months in November. Taken together with services, S&P Global India Composite PMI Output Index rose to 56.7 in November from 55.5 in October. This is actually the good news. Festive boost for business activity and sales. Higher input costs, that is for the energy industry, food industry, packaging industry, paper industry, plastic industry, and for the electrical products. Next, the festive boost for business activity and sales. And the last highlight of this particular service industry segment is prices charged for the provision of services at 64-month high. So, dear friends, as we have been seeing, India's services activity touched a 3-month high in November is actually quite encouraging as the business inflows rose markedly amid accommodative demand conditions and led to further job creation, with service providers being optimistic for the year ahead. A private survey has basically summarized this particular matter. So this is quite encouraging. Next important news segment for today's news highlight is regarding the manufacturing sector, particularly for the handsets segment. That is, India may export handsets worth $9 billion in the financial year 2023. This has been quoted by Mr. Chandrasekhar, He has further said that this figure of $9 billion in the financial year 2023 is actually up from $5.8 billion a year before, as the manufacturers step up production and outward shipments. India is set to achieve the overall electronics manufacturing of $300 billion by financial year 2026. As per the data from the industry body India Cellular and Electronics Association, that is ICEA, electronics worth roughly $87 billion were manufactured locally in the financial year 2022, which is expected to grow to $100 billion in the financial year 2023. Mobile phone exports have already raced past the $5 billion mark in the first 7 months, that is April to October of the financial year 2023, that is for the months April, May, June, July, August, September, October. More than double the $2.2 billion that India clocked in the same period last year, as the likes of Apple and Samsung pushed exports. The development of an ecosystem for electronics manufacturing and a subsequent rise in exports are primarily being led by the production-linked incentive, that is PLI schemes. Early on in 2021, we sat with the industry and worked out this $300 billion roadmap. Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, Minister of State for Electronics and IT, told Economic Times. One of the key things of the target was significantly expanding exports to go from the current $18 to $20 billion to $120 billion by the financial year 2026. This fiscal, mobile phone exports are expected to reach $9 billion, the minister said. In the $120 billion electronics exports targeted by the financial year 2026, mobile phones could account for $60 billion. This is truly marvelous. According to the industry data, the export of electronics goods in the April to September period grew 54% to $10.2 billion from $6.5 billion in the financial year 2022. The minister said all states want to participate in the electronics manufacturing opportunity, which is creating hundreds of thousands of jobs across the country. The participation of all states, he added, is actually required to make India an electronics manufacturing hub. Now, what has happened in that segment is that 66% of the foreign direct investment in electronics has come in the last 3 years, and almost every state now is competing to attract the investments, he said, adding that it's quite clear the digital and electronics manufacturing space is among the fastest job creators. The central government is actually in touch with all state governments regarding electronics manufacturing. Mr. Chandrasekhar has been regularly meeting the IT ministers of all states to streamline the processes and remove the bottlenecks, such as incentive payments. The 41,000 crore rupees PLI scheme for the smartphone manufacturing commenced in 2020, and Tamil Nadu has emerged as a strong player in attracting the companies such as Foxconn and Picatron, contract manufacturers for Apple, apart from Dell and Bharat F1H, another Foxconn unit. Karnataka is the base for another Apple contract maker, Wistron, while Samsung manufactures at its Uttar Pradesh plant. Apart from these states, Others, including Gujarat and Maharashtra, have been pressing for electronic units. Backed by the scheme aimed at weaning away electronics manufacturers mainly from China and Vietnam. The mobile phones have become the single largest contributor to electronics exports, driven by the likes of Apple and Samsung. India made devices are now being shipped to the countries including the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Austria, and Italy, said industry executives. Earlier, India made handsets were being exported mainly to the Middle East, Africa, and South African region. The smartphone PLI scheme's success has prompted the government to launch similar schemes in 14 sectors such as automobile and auto components, IT hardware, telecom equipment and design, pharmaceuticals, solar modules, metals and mining, textiles and apparel, white goods, drones, and advanced chemistry cell batteries. Isn't it truly commendable, dear friends? I find this really remarkable achievement by the Indian economy. Now, going forward, we are going to take India's millets story to the world as quoted by Mr. Piyush Goyal. The Commerce and Industry Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, on Monday asked the industry to take India's millets story global, approach newer markets, make them organic and sustainable, reduce the packaging size, and see if they can be GI tagged. The United Nations has designated 2023 as the International Year of Millets. Let's mainstream the millets story and take it global eye. India produces 20% of the global production at 16 million tons. Isn't it commendable? Truly fantastic it is. Mr. Goyal said at the pre-launch of the International Year of Millets. So dear friends, this was all about today's Golden News highlight. I hope you will find this truly motivating that we are Indians and yes, we are moving ahead with great vigor and the spark in our destinies. Thank you so much. So on this note, I would like to end today's session. And I hope you will be deeply benefited with the great insights shared in this lecture session. Thank you so much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.